In Colombia, at least 5 people have been killed as the streets of Bogota are in chaos following the death of Javier Ordóñez. Evacuating migrants from Lesbos and the other Greek islands is now a humanitarian imperative for the European Union. A huge fire raged in Beirut port, sparking alarm among Lebanese still reeling from the devastating dockside explosion that disfigured the capital last month. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Laura Palmeiro. In Colombia, at least 5 people have been killed as the streets of Bogota are in chaos following the death of Javier Ordóñez, who was tasered to death by police officers for allegedly violating quarantine rules. In the early hours of Wednesday morning, the 46-year-old father of 2 was taken into custody but later died in hospital. Anti-police protests swept the city and riot police were dispatched as the protests became increasingly violent and spread to new areas. The government has confirmed that at least 5 people have been killed so far during the protests, which have now spread to other cities across the country. So far, there have been 4 incidents of violence reported in just 24 hours, in which 14 people were killed, bringing the total number of fatalities linked to the recent spike in violence to at least 200 deaths so far in 2020. This Thursday, after hours of brutal police repression against different communities in Colombia, the government answered calls for help. The Minister of Defense, Carlos Holmes Trujillo, will militarize Bogota, putting in the streets 300 soldiers, and will also add 1,600 police officers from the capital and other departments of the country.
An evaluation was made, and with the participation of the mayor of Bogota, we took several decisions for the country's capital. The police will be strengthened in Bogota, with 750 officers, adding 850 from other regions. More than 300 soldiers from the 13th Army Brigade will support to work in the capital. We are offering a reward of up to 50 million Colombian pesos in exchange of information that leads to the capture of murderers of those 5 people that died, as well as those responsible for acts of vandalism.
And Brazil added 1,075 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, with which the number of deaths exceeded 128,000, while the confirmed cases are close to 4.2 million cases, according to this Wednesday's report from the Ministry of Health. According to the most recent official bulletin, the South American giant registered 35,816 new cases in the last day. On the other hand, over 3 million people have recovered from the disease, more than 80% of the patients affected by COVID-19, which shows a slight decrease of the coronavirus in South American country. And the World Health Organization criticized the Brazilian government's actions against the COVID-19 pandemic. The report will be presented to other governments before the United Nations Human Rights Council and highlights those states that have committed human rights violations in the handling of the pandemic. The report was summarized by the United Nations reporter Vasco Tunkak. Also, the Brazilian Ministry of Health revalidated its contract with the biopharmaceutical company AstraZeneca from the United Kingdom to produce the vaccine developed by the University of Oxford after the clinical trials of the drug against COVID-19 were paralyzed. The contract between Fiocruz and AstraZeneca will not be altered in any way, according to authorities. In addition to the Memorandum of Understanding, the technological agreement has already been signed electronically, said the Deputy Minister of the sector, Elcio Franco. The Stats news site indicated that AstraZeneca, based in London, interrupted clinical trials of its vaccine candidate against COVID-19 on Wednesday, one of the most advanced in the world. According to the source, an unknown disease was detected in one of the volunteers participating in this process. In Brazil, the study involves 5,000 volunteers and is progressing as expected. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel called on the population to stay where they live and to strengthen controls on the borders of those territories that reported COVID-19 cases. After having 0 cases reported, Cuba is seeing now a spike in the number of confirmed patients, and this Thursday reported new 92 cases and 2 deaths.
We have to limit the moving around of people. I know that it hurts, that it is a sacrifice that we have to make, but it is necessary under the current conditions. We must avoid the family visit, the visits to friends, because if people move around, the risk of transmission increases. Every time there is a place with many cases, it does not matter in which phase we are, in a province or in a locality, immediately. The moving of people from there to other provinces must be avoided.
Cuba participates today in a virtual forum of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, dedicated to discussing the complex scenario facing Caribbean countries in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. The virtual session of ECLAC's Caribbean Development and Cooperation Committee takes place this Thursday between 2 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. local time, and Deborah Rivas, Vice Minister of Foreign Trade and Foreign Investment, will participate on behalf of Cuba. Representatives of the member countries of said committee will analyze the regional perspectives from the adoption of creative and lasting solutions for the recovery of COVID-19 that indicates the meeting is programmed. Haitian Minister of Education condemned attacks on school by people who identify themselves as students amid the riots that are shaking all the country. The Minister of Education, Josué Argenor Cadet, suggested that some hidden agendas support violence among students and regretted threats and attacks against Fris Pierre-Louis, Normalien and Roger Anglade high schools. Since mid-August, after the beginning of a school year, professors have marched on the streets and in front of educational institutions to demand salary increases and late payments. The National Teachers Union accused the ministry of trying to stifle the mobilizations by transferring activists to the departments and insisted on upholding their demands. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Evacuating migrants from Lesbos and other Greek islands is now a humanitarian imperative for the European Union following the fire at Moria camp, the Red Cross said on Thursday. Francesco Roca, president of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, said containing migrants for years on the Greek islands was not a solution to the crisis. The fire on Tuesday at Greece's largest migrant camp destroyed the official part of the Moria facility, which housed 4,000 people. A second blaze on Wednesday destroyed most of the remaining camp, where another 8,000 people lived in tents and makeshift shacks around the perimeter. Lesbos is the main port of entry for arrivals in EU member states Greece because of its close proximity to Turkey.
Another side. We have, I think, if me tell you, 300 family, I like much on that number. Sleeping on the street, not have food, not have anything. Go inside for Moria. If you find water, you drink. If you not find, you stay thirsty, you stay hungry. This situation is tragic.
Because all the camp had burned. Zone 9, Zone 6, all tents. Now we don't have any food, any tents. We sleep in the road. It's very, very bad.
The London hearing on WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's extradition from Britain to the United States was suspended Thursday because one of the lawyers may have been exposed to the coronavirus. District Judge Vanessa Baraitser ordered the proceedings adjourned until Monday, while a lawyer representing the United States government is tested for the virus. Assange is fighting American prosecutors' attempt to get the British government to send him to the U.S. to stand trial on spying charges. United States prosecutors have indicted the 49-year-old Australian on 18 espionage and computer misuse charges over WikiLeaks' publication of secret U.S. military documents a decade ago. The charges carry a maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. Germany's Disease Control Center reported 1,892 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday. The total number of infections since the beginning of the pandemic is now over 255,000 cases, and more than 9,000 people have died. The Robert Koch Institute said coronavirus outbreaks are being reported in various settings, especially celebrations with family and friends and at group events. The number of newly reported cases in Germany declined from about mid-March to the beginning of July. Since then, the number of cases has increased, but has stabilized over the past week, according to the center. Bulgarians once again took the streets of the capital on Thursday to continue anti-government protests, which have been running for 2 months. Thousands have joined the daily rallies on downtown Sofia to demand the resignations of Prime Minister Boyko Borisov and Chief Prosecutor Ivan Gashev. The protesters packed the square between the buildings of the government and parliament, which were cordoned off by huge police presence. Bulgaria's President Rumen Radev is backing the protest by calling on the center-right cabinet of Borisov to Gashev and step down. On Thursday, Radev said in a Facebook post that the stubbornness of the incumbents only worsens the crisis and reiterated his call to the protesters to not give in to the provocations. A report from the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, indicated that the infant mortality rate in India decreased from 1990 to 2019 to 34 per thousand live by birth. The Population Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the World Bank showed that the mortality rate among children under 5 years of age dropped from 126 in 1990 down to 34 for every 1,000 live births in 2019. The country recorded an annual rate of reduction in the mortality of children under 5 years of age of 4.5% between 1990 and 2019, as per the website to All India radio station. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. A huge fire raged in Beirut port on Thursday, sparking alarm among Lebanese still reeling from the devastating dockside explosion that disfigured the capital last month. It was not immediately clear what caused the blaze just over a month after the August 4 blast, which killed more than 190 people, wounded thousands, and ravaged much of the capital. The interim head of the port, Bassem Al-Qaisi, told Lebanese television channel LBC that the blaze started in the port's free zone, where an importer had stocked cooking oil containers and tires. The fire started with oil containers before moving onto the tires, he said. It was either caused by the heat or by a mistake. It's too early to say. Mali's military junta on Thursday launched 3-day national consultations with political parties, unions and NGOs facing questions at home and pressure from abroad over its plans for returning the country to civilian rule. Around 500 people are attending the forum, unfolding at the conference center in Bamako, the capital of the improvised West African state. The talks mark the second round of discussions between the young officers who overthrew President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta on August 18 and civilian representatives, many of whom had campaigned fiercely for him to resign. At stake is how the junta intends to make good on its vow made just hours after the coup. They restore civilian governance and stage elections within a reasonable time. Three months of pounding rain in Niger have left 65 people dead and affected nearly 330,000, while several areas of the capital, Niamey, remain underwater, the government said. The Ministry of Humanitarian Action and Disaster Management told AFP on Tuesday that on September 7, 51 people had died when their home collapsed in the floods and 14 had drowned. The worst affected regions are Maradi in the central south of the country, Tahua and Tillaberi in the west, and Dosso in the southwest. At least 10 of the deaths were in the capital Niamey, where the rain caused the Niger River to brush its banks, municipal authorities said. Niger is one of the world's driest countries and frequently suffers from a spell of droughts. The Iranian Navy began a three-day exercise in the Sea of Oman near the strategic Strait of Hormuz on Thursday, deploying an array of warships, drones, and missiles. One of the exercise objectives is to devise tactical offensive and defensive strategies for safeguarding the country's territorial waters and shipping lanes, the military said on its website. The Navy will test fire surface-to-surface and shore-to-sea, cruise missiles and torpedoes, and rocket launching systems fitted on warships, submarines, aircraft, and drones, it added. The exercise spokesman, Commodore Sharman Irani, said the foreign aircraft, especially U.S. drones, had been warned to steer clear in the area. Rising Nile floodwaters are threatening to swamp an ancient archaeological site in Sudan after some of the highest ever recorded river levels. Teams have set on span-down walls and are pumping out of water to prevent damage at the ruins of Al-Bahamidiya, once a royal city of the 2 millennia-old Meroitic Empire.
Next to the royal bath. Then we made a barrier to prevent water from entering the main stream inside the royal city. And the final stage is to suction the water by pumps and return it to the Nile to dry the ancient city wall as much as possible to keep the site safe. The water annually reached the boundaries of the site protected by concrete columns up to 1.5 meters long. And in this year, these columns were flooded with water to a height of more than 1 meter and 20 centimeters. And this is a very high level in relation to the level of the Nile this year.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Laura Palmeiro. Thank you for watching.